In fantasy hockey, you have breakout players and you have disappointing players. In this episode of Disappointing Players in Fantasy Hockey, I'll be talking about Sidney Crosby. At the beginning of the season, there were very high expectations both for the Pittsburgh Penguins and Sidney Crosby. Thus far, both have been a disappointment. It has been a disappointment both for Crosby himself and for his fantasy owners, because he was taken very high in fantasy drafts. Crosby got off to one of the worst starts in his NHL career, making him a fantasy dud in the early going. Crosby was ranked second overall in Yahoo Fantasy Hockey, and I don't think anyone would argue that. After Crosby got off to a very slow start to the season, and several superstars emerged and got off to really good starts to their season, started to question whether he should still be ranked in the top 3 in fantasy hockey. So far this season, Crosby has 14 goals, 36 points in 43 games played, which is pretty solid production for an NHL player, but it's subpar production for Sidney Crosby. It is subpar production because of the hype and consistency that Crosby is accustomed to having. He is normally averaging at around a point per game. This is how good Sidney Crosby is. A disappointing season for him is still a good season for many other players in the NHL. I would say that it's a disappointment for fantasy owners of Sidney Crosby because they drafted him with such high expectations of him going into the season, and he has not lived up to that high expectation yet, because when you're a first round pick in fantasy hockey, you expect them to be producing way more than he had been. Next episode of Disappointing Players in Fantasy Hockey, I will be talking about Craig Smith.